The village of Kwanda was a place of laughter and unity, where the golden sun bathed the earth in warmth, and the wind carried the scent of ripening fruit from the orchards. In this peaceful land lived Naledi, a woman as radiant as the morning sun. She was known not only for her beauty but for her kindness, a trait that made her beloved by the elders and respected by the young. Wherever she walked, smiles followed, and wherever she spoke, hearts softened. Naledi's life had not always been easy. Her mother had passed away when she was still a child, leaving her to be raised by her father, a man of great honor and wisdom. Under his guidance, she grew into a woman of integrity, learning the values of patience, respect, and love. But life, unpredictable as it was, had another twist waiting for her. When Naledi was just on the brink of womanhood, her father remarried. His new wife, Zinhle, came with a daughter of her own, Zinhle. At first, the villagers rejoiced, believing that Naledi would finally have a sister to share her days with. But from the moment Zinhle set foot in their home, she was a storm waiting to break. Zinhle was everything Naledi was not. Where Naledi's beauty was warm and inviting, Zinhle's was sharp and demanding. Where Naledi was humble and gentle, Zinhle was calculating and filled with silent resentment. She saw how people adored Naledi, how men spoke her name with reverence, and how women admired her grace. But it was not admiration that filled Zinhle's heart, it was envy, dark and consuming. Naledi, ever the optimist, tried to embrace Zinhle as a sister, sharing her jewelry, her knowledge, and even the secrets of her heart. But Zinhle wanted more than trinkets or sisterhood, she wanted everything Naledi had. And that included Sizwe. Sizwe was a man of honor, a skilled hunter who carried the strength of his ancestors in his blood. He was well respected in Kwanda, a man whose words carried weight, whose presence commanded respect. But beyond his strength, he was also a man of deep love, and that love was reserved for Naledi. Their engagement was the talk of the village. Elders spoke of it with pride, and young girls dreamed of a love as pure as theirs. When Sizwe looked at Naledi, it was with a tenderness that made even the wind pause. He saw her not only as a woman of beauty but as a soul filled with goodness. Together, they were a pair destined for happiness. But happiness was not something Zinhle could allow, at least, not for Naledi. Each day, she watched them from the shadows, her heart twisting with rage. She saw how Sizwe's eyes followed Naledi, how his laughter was fullest in her presence. Zinhle convinced herself that she deserved that love, that it should have been hers. What did Naledi have that she didn't? Why should Naledi have everything while she was left in the background? Bitterness turned into obsession, and obsession turned into a plan. Zinhle knew that if she wanted Sizwe, she could not take him by force. No, men like him were not won with beauty alone, they were won with whispers, with poison wrapped in honeyed words, with carefully planted doubts that grew into thorns. So Zinhle smiled sweetly whenever she was near Naledi, pretending to be a devoted sister. She helped with chores, braided her stepsister's hair, and listened to her speak of Sizwe with a feigned heart. But in the depths of her mind, she was already plotting. She would not sit back and watch Naledi take everything. No, she would have Sizwe, even if it meant tearing her stepsister's world apart. Zinhle knew that stealing a man's heart was not done in a single act, it was a slow, careful game of deception. And she was patient. She began her work with subtlety, planting seeds of doubt in Sizwe's mind like a farmer sowing crops before the rain. Each time they met, she would find a way to slip in a word, a half-truth, or a lingering question. "Sizwe, do you ever wonder why Naledi spends so much time by the river?" she mused one day, her voice casual, yet deliberate. Sizwe frowned. "She likes the water. It brings her peace." Zinhle let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Ah, peace, or perhaps company." It was only a whisper, a fleeting suggestion, but it did its work. Doubt, once planted, had a way of growing all on its own. Over the following weeks, Zinhle intensified her efforts. She created moments that did not exist, twisting reality to fit her scheme. She convinced a young man from the village, a wandering trader named Damani, to speak with Naledi often. She ensured that these encounters always took place in the open, where wandering eyes could see and curious tongues could wag. At first, Sizwe ignored the rumors, trusting in Naledi's love. But rumors had a way of turning into truth when repeated enough times. And Zinhle was relentless. "Sizwe, I do not wish to speak ill of my sister," she would say, her voice heavy with false sorrow. "But I saw her with Damani again today. They stood so close, she laughed the way she used to laugh with you." Sizwe's jaw clenched, but he shook his head. "Naledi is faithful." Zinhle sighed, placing a hand on his arm. "Of course, you know her best. But people are talking, Sizwe. They say she is in love with another." Sizwe tried to push the thoughts away, but doubt gnawed at his heart. He began to notice small things, how Naledi smiled at Damani in passing, how she lingered by the river a little too long, how she seemed distant at times. Then Zinhle delivered the final blow. Late one evening, she sent word for Sizwe to meet her near the village outskirts, where a dense thicket of trees stood. "I do not want to hurt you, Sizwe," she said, her voice trembling with feigned reluctance. "But you deserve to see the truth with your own eyes." Through the leaves, Sizwe saw Naledi speaking with Damani. The traitor stood close, his voice low, his body leaning toward her. He did not hear the conversation, did not see the worry on Naledi's face as she tried to step away. He only saw what Zinhle wanted him to see. Rage erupted within him like fire catching dry grass. The next day, he confronted Naledi, his eyes dark with betrayal. "How long have you been lying to me?" he demanded. Naledi recoiled, confusion clouding her face. "Lying? Sizwe, what are you talking about? Do not insult me with false innocence." His voice thundered, drawing the attention of the villagers. "I saw you with Damani. I heard the whispers." Naledi's heart pounded. "Damani? He is nothing to me." Zinhle stepped forward, her face painted with false pity. "Sizwe, please," she murmured. "Perhaps we should not do this here." But Sizwe was blind with pain. "I trusted you, Naledi. I gave you my heart, and you threw it away." The villagers murmured among themselves, watching as Naledi stood frozen, her world crumbling around her. Then, before she could even defend herself, her stepmother, Zinhle, stepped in. "Enough of this shame," she hissed, seizing the opportunity. "Naledi, you have brought disgrace to this family. You will not stay under my roof any longer." Naledi's breath caught in her throat. "Stepmother, please. You are not my daughter." Zinhle spat. "Take your lies and go." The words struck deeper than any blade. Naledi looked at Sizwe, pleading with her eyes, but he turned away. Tears blurred her vision as she was cast out, left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the weight of a betrayal she had not committed. "And Zinhle?" She stepped to Sizwe's side, resting a gentle hand on his arm. "I am so sorry, Sizwe," she whispered. "I wish you did not have to go through this." Days passed, and with Naledi gone, Zinhle moved quickly. She played the role of the comforting friend, the shoulder to lean on, the woman who understood his pain. Slowly, she wove herself into Sizwe's life, filling the space Naledi had once occupied. It did not take long before she stood in Naledi's place, not as the abandoned stepsister, but as Sizwe's wife. On the day of the wedding, she stood before the village, smiling in triumph, believing she had won. But fate is not blind. And for those who take what is not theirs, destiny always finds a way to collect its debt. Zinhle had won. She had the ring, the husband, the home. But victory, she quickly realized, was not the same as happiness. At first, she basked in her triumph. The village women who once ignored her now acknowledged her with respectful nods. She walked through the marketplace with her head high, wearing the finest beads and fabrics, a symbol of her new status. People whispered, but she convinced herself it was out of admiration, not judgment. Sizwe was hers now, but something was missing. He did his duties as a husband, he provided for her, built a strong home, and ensured she never lacked food or fine garments. But there was a distance between them, like a wall she could not break. When he spoke, his voice lacked warmth. When he touched her, there was no passion. He never looked at her the way he had once looked at Naledi. The first few nights, Zinhle brushed it off. He is still heartbroken, she told herself. Time will make him forget her. But time passed, and nothing changed. She tried to be the perfect wife, she cooked his favorite meals, greeted him with a smile, and laughed at his jokes. Yet, at night, he lay beside her like a stranger. And then came the nightmares. One night, Zinhle woke to the sound of Sizwe murmuring in his sleep. She turned to him, only to hear a name escape his lips. Naledi. Her heart clenched. She shook him awake, her voice tight. Who are you dreaming of? Sizwe sat up, rubbing his eyes. It was nothing. It was Naledi. Sizwe sighed. I do not want to talk about this. Zinhle clenched her fists beneath the blankets. It was not supposed to be this way. She had taken Naledi's place, yet she still lived in her shadow. The whispers in the village grew louder. Women gossiped as they fetched water, their voices like knives cutting through Zinhle's pride. They say she used tricks to steal Sizwe. Sizwe does not love her. Look at the way he walks, like a man carrying regret on his shoulders. She took another woman's blessing, and now it is turning into a curse. Zinhle forced herself to ignore them, but their words buried themselves deep in her heart. Desperation crept in. If love would not come naturally, she would make it come by force. She sought out an old woman known for making charms and potions. Mother, I need your help, Zinhle said, kneeling before the woman. The old woman studied her with wise, tired eyes. You are the one who took her stepsister's husband. Zinhle flinched. Even this woman knew. I just want my husband to love me. The old woman scoffed. Love cannot be stolen, child. But if you wish to bind his heart, there are ways. She handed Zinhle a small pouch filled with dark powder. Mix this into his food. It will make him desire you. But remember, desire is not love. Zinhle did not care. That night, she prepared Sizwe's meal with shaking hands, sprinkling the powder into his stew. At first, it worked. Sizwe grew closer, more affectionate, his hands lingering when he touched her. But his eyes were still distant. And then, one night, the charm failed. Sizwe woke with a start, sweat beading on his forehead. He turned to Zinhle, his face pale. What have you done to me? He whispered. Zinhle's blood ran cold. I have been seeing shadows, hearing voices. My mind is not my own. He rose to his feet, pacing. Something is wrong. I feel trapped. This is not love. Zinhle reached for him. Sizwe, I only wanted to make you happy. He pulled away. You wanted to make yourself happy. The distance between them became unbearable. Days passed, and Sizwe spent more and more time away from home. He spoke little to Zinhle, his once gentle nature now hardened by resentment. One evening, as Zinhle walked through the village, she heard the whispers again. Sizwe has been asking about Naledi. Someone saw him at the river, sitting alone, staring into the water. They say he regrets everything. Zinhle clenched her fists. She had taken everything from Naledi, her love, her home, her future. But even now, Naledi still haunted her. She could feel it, the weight of her crime pressing down on her. She had won. But at what cost? Zinhle awoke to the sound of the wind howling outside, rattling the thatched roof of her once proud home. The air inside felt heavy, thick with an unseen presence that made her skin crawl. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders and glanced at Sizwe's side of the bed, empty, as it had been for many nights. Her heart twisted with frustration. He was slipping away, and no matter what she did, she couldn't hold him. Then, the misfortunes began. At first, they were small inconveniences, a pot of water cracking over the fire, the sudden spoilage of meat that had been fresh only hours before. But soon, the troubles grew darker. Their wealth, which once flourished, began to dwindle. Traders who once sought Sizwe for business turned their backs on him, deals falling through one after another. Crops that should have yielded plenty withered before they could be harvested, their roots rotting in the ground. Then came the sickness. First, it was the livestock. One morning, Zinhle stepped outside to find 3 goats lying lifeless in the pen, their bodies stiff and cold. Days later, Sizwe fell ill. It started with fatigue. He returned home earlier than usual, his face pale, his body weak. Then, the fevers began, his skin burning hot at night, his breath labored. Zinhle did everything she could. She prepared healing teas, sought out the village healer, even prayed to the spirits she had long ignored. But nothing worked. And then, she learned the truth. One afternoon, as she walked through the village, she overheard hushed voices behind a hut. "Sizwe has been asking about Naledi," one woman murmured. Zinhle froze, her nails digging into her palm. "He wants to find her," another whispered. "He says he made a mistake, that he was blind." Zinhle's vision blurred with rage. Even as he lay in their home, sweating from fever, he was thinking of Naledi. That night, she confronted him. "Why are you searching for her?" she demanded, standing over him as he lay weakly on the mat. Sizwe turned his head, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Because I was wrong." Zinhle clenched her fists. "She is gone, Sizwe. She is not coming back." He sighed, closing his eyes. "I wish that were true." Zinhle staggered back as though he had struck her. The pain in her chest burned, a deep wound she had no way of healing. That evening, she visited her mother, desperate for comfort. But instead of reassurance, she found only cold truth. "You think you can take something that was never meant for you and not pay the price?" her mother asked, shaking her head. "You think love can be stolen like a piece of jewelry?" Zinhle's throat tightened. "I only wanted what was best for me." Her mother sighed. "You wanted what belonged to another. And now, you are learning that betrayal always demands payment." Zinhle left without another word, but her mother's warning clung to her like a curse. And then, the whispers began. At first, she thought they were in her mind, but at night, as the wind howled through the cracks in the walls, she heard them, soft, chilling voices weaving through the air like a song of sorrow. "Thief of love. Bearer of false joy. You took what was not yours, and now it will be taken from you." Zinhle tossed and turned, covering her ears, but the whispers never left her. Day by day, she grew more paranoid. Shadows seemed darker, eyes lingered on her longer than before. She felt as though unseen hands were tightening around her life, squeezing until there was nothing left. She had thought she won. But fate had other plans. The sun hung low over the village of Kwanda, casting golden hues over the familiar pathways Naledi once walked. The warm breeze carried the scent of earth and firewood, stirring memories she had long buried. But she was not the same girl who had left in shame and heartbreak. She had returned as a woman of strength, wisdom, and quiet power. As she walked through the village, heads turned. Eyes widened in recognition, then disbelief. The frail, heartbroken girl they had cast out was gone. In her place stood a woman draped in fine fabrics, her posture regal, her presence commanding. A quiet murmur spread like wildfire. "Is that Naledi? She has returned. Look at her, she is radiant." Naledi met their stares with calm indifference, though inside, her heart pounded. She had thought of this moment for years, wondering what it would feel like to walk through Kwanda again. To see the people who had turned their backs on her. And then, she saw her mother's house. The sight sent a rush of emotions through her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had not come for revenge, nor to reopen old wounds. She had come because she deserved to return, to reclaim what had been stolen from her. The news reached Zinhle before the sun had fully set. She had been sitting alone in her home, lost in her own quiet suffering when she heard the whispers outside her window. "Naledi has returned." Zinhle's blood ran cold. For years, she had lived in fear of this moment. Though no one had spoken of it aloud, she always knew it was a possibility, that the past would one day rise again to haunt her. She rushed outside, desperate to confirm the truth with her own eyes. And there she was, Naledi, standing among the people, her face serene, her beauty even more striking than before. She carried herself with the grace of a woman untouched by bitterness, and yet Zinhle knew, she knew Naledi had not forgotten. A new fear gripped Zinhle's chest. What if Sizwe saw her? What if he realized what he had lost? Her worst nightmare came true when she heard his voice behind her. Naledi? Zinhle turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Sizwe standing there, staring at Naledi as if he had seen a ghost. But it was no ghost. It was the woman he had betrayed. Naledi turned to him, her expression unreadable. Sizwe took slow steps forward, his eyes filled with emotions he could not put into words. He had spent years carrying the weight of regret, but nothing compared to the moment he stood before her again, knowing he had shattered something that could never be repaired. Naledi, he said again, his voice raw. You have returned. She did not smile. She did not offer him the kindness he once took for granted. Yes, she said simply. I have. The crowd watched in silence, sensing the tension thick in the air. Sizwe swallowed hard. I thought you were gone forever. I was. A long pause. I was wrong, Sizwe admitted, his voice trembling. I was a fool. I let lies blind me, and I see now what I lost. Naledi, She lifted a hand, silencing him. It does not matter. His face fell. I did not return for you, she continued. I did not return to relive the past. What is done is done. Zinhle stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. You should not have come back, she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. You were gone. You should have stayed gone. Naledi turned to her, meeting her frantic gaze with calm eyes. And yet, here I am. Zinhle clenched her fists. You think you can just walk back into this village and undo everything? Naledi tilted her head slightly. Is that what you fear? Zinhle opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Because yes, she feared exactly that. She had spent years clinging desperately to a life built on deceit, but she could feel it slipping. The villagers who once whispered about her behind closed doors were now whispering about Naledi instead. She saw the admiration in their eyes, the respect that had never truly belonged to her. And worst of all, she saw the way Sizwe looked at Naledi. Not with pity. Not with guilt. But with longing. A longing for the woman he had cast aside. A realization too late. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that felt thick with unseen forces shifting in the dark. Zinhle sat alone in her dimly lit hut, her mind spiraling with fear. She had seen it in Sizwe's eyes, the way he looked at Naledi, the way regret clung to him like a shadow. She had spent years trying to bury the past, but now, with Naledi's return, the cracks in her perfect life were splitting wide open. Desperation clawed at her chest. She could not lose everything. She would not. And so, under the cover of darkness, she wrapped herself in a cloak and ventured to the very outskirts of Kwanda. The villagers spoke of an old healer who lived deep in the woods, a woman with knowledge of forbidden arts. Zinhle had ignored the whispers before, had dismissed the stories of those who sought her aid only to regret it later. But tonight, she did not care. She followed the narrow, winding path through the forest, heart pounding with every step. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Shadows moved where there should have been none, but she pressed on. Finally, she reached the old healer's hut. Smoke curled from the roof, and the air smelled of strange herbs and something more bitter, more sinister. A single flickering light shone through the cracks in the wooden walls. Taking a shaky breath, Zinhle stepped inside. The healer was waiting. She was an old woman, her face lined with deep wrinkles, her eyes sharp as if they could see straight into Zinhle's soul. She sat beside a low fire, stirring a thick, bubbling concoction in a clay pot. I knew you would come, the woman murmured without looking up. Zinhle shivered. I need your help. The healer nodded, still stirring. You seek to keep something that does not belong to you. Zinhle bristled. Sizwe is my husband. The old woman chuckled, a dry and knowing sound. Is he? Zinhle's throat tightened. He is. But I can feel him slipping away. Naledi's return has changed everything. I need something to make him stay. To make him love me again. The healer finally looked up, her eyes dark as storm clouds. Love cannot be stolen without consequence. I don't care about consequences. Zinhle snapped. I will pay whatever price. The old woman held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. She reached for a bundle of dried herbs, tossing them into the pot. The flames crackled, and the liquid inside darkened, turning thick and murky. A scent filled the hut, sweet, cloying, but underneath it, something rotten. This will bind him to you, the healer said. His heart will turn from Naledi. He will see no beauty but yours, hear no voice but yours. Zinhle's hands trembled as she reached for the small vial the healer poured for her. But be warned, the old woman whispered. A heart taken by force does not beat the same. You will not like what you have won. Zinhle ignored her. She clutched the vial to her chest and fled into the night, her mind already spinning with plans. The spell's betrayal. The next morning, Zinhle carefully mixed the potion into Sizwe's drink, her fingers shaking with excitement. He would love her again. He would forget Naledi. She watched as he lifted the cup to his lips, tilting his head back to drink. She held her breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, his body stiffened. His expression twisted. He turned to Zinhle, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. It was not love. It was disgust. He dropped the cup as if realizing something foul had passed his lips. His hand went to his throat, his breathing heavy. What did you do? Zinhle stepped back. I only wanted. Sizwe recoiled from her as though she were something unclean. I feel wrong. He rubbed his temples, his face contorted. Why does your voice grate on me? Why does your touch burn? Zinhle's chest tightened. This was not how it was supposed to go. Over the next days, things only worsened. The more she tried to be near him, the more he pulled away. His affection didn't return, it turned into something worse than hatred. He could not stand to look at her. And then, the rumors started. The villagers whispered of her secret visit to the healer. Of the spell she had cast. The people of Kwando were not kind to those who dabbled in forbidden things. When Sizwe learned the truth, his rage was unlike anything she had ever seen. You would dare try to twist my will, he roared. You would use darkness to force love? Zinhle fell to her knees, sobbing. I did it for us. For you and me. He stepped back as if her words repulsed him. There was never an US. I was a fool to believe your lies, but this is unforgivable. He left her that night. The village followed soon after. No one would speak to her. No one would trade with her. The wealth she had once flaunted crumbled, piece by piece. The home she had built turned cold and empty. Her mother, the only ally she had left, looked at her with disappointment. I warned you, she said softly. You built your life on stolen things. Now you see what happens when the winds shift. Zinhle had won everything, only to watch it slip through her fingers like sand. And in the distance, standing tall, untouched by ruin, was Naledi. She did not need to lift a finger to destroy Zinhle. Fate had done it for her. The sun was merciless as it beat down on the once proud figure of Zinhle. The woman who had stolen love, deceived her way into wealth, and relished in another's misfortune now wandered through the village as a shadow of herself. Her once radiant beauty had withered under the weight of despair. Her fine clothes, once the envy of Kwanda, had grown tattered, their colors faded like the life draining from her soul. She had lost everything. Sizwe had abandoned her. His love, which had never truly been hers, had turned into disgust. When the truth of her betrayal and dark dealings had surfaced, the village had shunned her. Doors that once opened for her with warmth and admiration were now slammed in her face. Those who once envied her status now pitied or despised her. She roamed the village in a haze of regret, her days consumed by the whispers of those who passed her by. Did you hear what she did? She bewitched her own husband. She brought this upon herself. Naledi was the rightful bride, look at her now. She is cursed. That word clung to her like a second skin, cursed. Her mother, the one person who had always encouraged her schemes, now refused to even meet her gaze. The older woman, ashamed of what they had done, had withdrawn, unwilling to bear the consequences of her daughter's choices. Zinhle sat outside the village well, where once, not so long ago, she had flaunted her new status as Sizwe's wife, casting smug glances at the women who had envied her. Now, she had no one. Her stomach ached from hunger, but it was nothing compared to the emptiness gnawing at her heart. Across the village, life moved on without her. And there, at the center of it all, was Naledi. The woman she had tried to destroy. Naledi had returned stronger, wiser, and unshaken by the betrayal that had once shattered her. She walked with the grace of someone who had conquered pain, her beauty radiant not just in appearance but in spirit. She no longer belonged to the past. Sizwe, too, saw it. His guilt weighed heavily on him, each step he took in the village feeling like a punishment for his blindness. He had allowed himself to be deceived, had thrown away a woman who had been nothing but loyal. And now, as he watched Naledi from afar, he knew the truth, he had never truly loved Zinhle. His heart had always belonged to the woman he had betrayed. One evening, just as the sun melted into the horizon, he gathered his courage and approached her. She was standing by the river, where they had once spoken of a future together, a future he had destroyed. Naledi, he said, his voice heavy with regret. She turned to him, her expression calm, unreadable. Sizwe. He hesitated. I was wrong. I let lies poison my mind. I should have never, he sighed, the words feeling inadequate. I can't undo the past, but I need you to know I regret it all. Naledi studied him for a long moment before speaking. Regret does not change what has been done. His shoulders sagged. I know. But I want to make things right. She shook her head, a small, sad smile on her lips. You cannot fix what you destroyed, Sizwe. And you cannot hold on to a love that no longer exists. The words struck him like a blade. But I have moved on. The finality in her voice shattered whatever hope he had clung to. For so long, he had believed that if Naledi forgave him, things would go back to how they were. But now, standing before her, he realized how much she had grown, how much she had changed. And he realized something else, he was the only one still trapped in the past. He had lost her. Not because of fate. Not because of bad luck. But because of his own choices. Sizwe left her standing by the river, his heart heavy with the weight of his mistakes. Back in the village, the elders called for a gathering. The story of Zinhle's downfall had become a lesson, a warning. The oldest among them, a man whose voice carried the weight of generations, stood before the villagers and spoke. When a heart is ruled by greed, it rots. When hands grasp for what is not theirs, they will lose even what they hold. Zinhle's story is one that must be remembered, not out of cruelty, but as a lesson. She built her life on deceit, and see what became of her. The villagers murmured in agreement. Naledi stood among them, her expression serene but firm. She had not needed revenge, Zinhle had destroyed herself. And Zinhle, sitting in the dirt at the edge of the gathering, felt their words like stones against her skin. She could not argue. Could not protest. They were right. She had done this to herself. One by one, the villagers turned away from her, returning to their homes, their families, their lives. And Zinhle, once the woman who had taken everything, was left with nothing.